Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the You Want It By When webinar. My name is Natasha and I'm an events coordinator at CMI. I'll shortly be handing over to David, who is running the session today. We are aware of some issues currently affecting our webpage, which our fantastic technical team are currently working on to resolve. If you do have any questions during the webinar, you can ask them using the live chat box to the right of your screen, and we shall answer as many as we can. Today's session is being recorded and it will be shared with you later on today. Now over to David, CHMC Assessment Manager at the Chartered Management Institute.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for your time today. I understand how valuable time is to everybody, and that's one of the things we're going to pick up on as we go through today's webinar. First of all, this is about mastering time and not managing time. In their wonderful book about time mastery, Karen Meager and John McLaughlin talk about mastering time rather than managing time. I've felt for a long time that you can't actually manage time. Time will come, time will go, and time will happen whether you do anything with it or not. As we go through this webinar, time will just progress. As you go to sleep, time still carries on. As you get busier and busier, time carries on and does exactly what it does whether you're using it or not. So we have to think about not managing time, but how we can master time, how we can use time best to achieve what we want to achieve, not only in work, but in life as well. And I think when we think about time, this is one of those places where it's you have to think about the whole of your life and think about what you do outside of work and what you do inside of work and how you use time as a resource. And think about time really as a resource rather than something that you just have to deal with. I read something this morning, somebody I follow on Instagram put up one of those inspirational posters that you see. And I thought it was quite apt, being what we're talking about today. It said, time is more valuable than money. You can always make more money, but you can never make any more time. And I think that's really important to remember that. And if we treat time as money, we'll get much more out of it. I think it's useful to think about how we think about time these days. And we need to think about what I call a sort of a magic triangle, really. We need to think about time, money, and health in that order. And we need to think about them in equal quantities as well. And think about how we spend them and how we use them best in order to get what we want from life and from work and from pressure when we're being given deadlines and very tight deadlines often. We need to think about how we relate to time as well. And I don't want to go on about this too long, but I think this is really useful to touch on. We are programmed with short-term behavior. We are programmed to deal with gratification, problem solving. You see this a lot in problem solving. I've solved the problem, I move on. You haven't really. You've solved a symptom. And we do that all the time. So we need to think about how we use time and why we relate to time in the way we do. And if we go back to sort of AD 50, the life expectancy of people then was much, much shorter than it is today. So the life expectancy of a man was around 29 and around 30 for a woman. You'd move forward to 1900, life expectancy had changed a bit, but nowhere near as much as it's changed in the last 100 years. So around 1900, the average life expectancy for a man would be around 47, and for a woman that would be around 50. And if we move forward to 2014, the average life expectancy has leapt to 80 for a man and 83 for a woman. And there are thinkers at the moment that think, well, there are people alive now who will live to 150. Why won't they? You know, with the increased medical support we have, with the better quality of food, with the better quality of life we have, there are people who are alive now who will outlive any expectation that you or I might have. There are also people alive now who are what we might term amortal. So if they're not killed in an accident, there is no reason why they would die. They will get old, they will get worn out, but medical science will help them with that. And there are people that will, you know, just go on and on and on. So we need to think about this when we deal with time. And if you think back to what I was saying about AD 50, you know, people look at gladiators, for example. And we look at gladiators and we think, well, why on earth would anybody go into that really dangerous profession? But if your life expectancy is 29 years on average, and you're 19, 18, 19, and you're offered the chance to be a celebrity, if you like. You're offered the chance to be the Ryan Giggs of the day. You're offered the chance to have a life of luxury in terms of the food that you eat. All right, you have a strict regime, but you've got access to the gym, you've got access to food, you've got a place to sleep. You've got the potential to earn lots of celebrity status. Yes, you might die, but actually, if your lifespan is only 29, what have you got to lose? It's very different to how we look at it today, but our brains are still hardwired to think in that way. So the result of this really is we think everything is urgent. We must make a decision today. Salespeople use this when we deal with them. Must make a decision today. It's only one chance. We've got to get this done. We think about work and we say, well, there's a deadline. We've got to get this done by the end of the week. And sometimes you need to stand back and say, well, actually, if I don't get this done by the end of the week, what's going to happen? Now, there's some occupations, obviously, where it is a matter of life and death and we just need to get stuff done. But for those of us that work outside of those environments, often we need to just check our stories that we're telling ourselves. Actually, how urgent is this? And is this the priority that I really need to focus on today? Without going through that process, we can focus on the wrong things. We can expend energy in the wrong way. I want to carry on thinking about how we spend time as a resource and think about the flow and the balance. And we need to achieve a balance between time, money, and health. If we focus too much on money, we're going to potentially damage our health. If we spend all our time looking after our health, then we might not get the money that we want to get. We might not have the income that we want to have. And if that's what's a priority for you, then absolutely fine. And there's no right or wrong in this. It's just about making sure that we balance all these three elements as we go through life. And as we go through every day, we think, okay, I need to get this done. Is getting that done going to throw up a consequence in terms of money? What do I want to focus on at this moment in time? Is it going to throw up a consequence in terms of my health? And is that something I need to focus on more at this time? And we think about time, we can lay this into a whole load of other arenas. If you think about mental health and well-being, for example, if you're in a position where you have to really consider your mental health and well-being, is money really where you want to focus your energy? Is money where you want to focus your time? Or are you focusing more on your health? So we need to consider all these elements, and we need to consider these things every day. And this is why I've brought into this not just the work element, but the personal element as well. Because if you don't manage these things outside of work, you're never going to manage them in work. And if you don't manage them in work, they will have a severe knock-on effect outside work for your family life, for your mental health, for your existence in general. So these are really important things to think about and really important things to consider. Excuse me. Time management is also about the stories that we tell ourselves, and we use phrases and we use stories, and we do this all the time, And busy can be a really beautiful word, but it can also be a really horrible word. Busy can make us feel important. It can make us feel in demand. It can give us a sense of value. It can make us feel like we're safe in a job because we're busy. On the other hand of that, busy can be really horrible. We can be overloaded. I'm so busy, I can't cope. I feel like I'm so busy that I now feel disorganized, and my disorganization gives me a lack of confidence. So I'm going to carry that into the next situation where I'm busy. I have no space to think. I have no space to operate. I can't manage with whatever I'm being asked to do. And this builds up and builds up and builds up. And often these are stories that we're telling ourselves. And we need to check how we're telling ourselves those stories. So how busy am I? Am I really busy doing things that are important? Or am I busy doing things to be busy? And have I fallen into the trap of being busy for the sake of being busy? And am I being busy because if I'm busier than you, then I look better than you? If I have a massive to-do list, then clearly I'm a really important person. These are stories that we're telling ourselves sometimes. And they may be true, but we just need to check the story, check in and say, actually, is this really the situation? Or am I just doing this because it's a habit, because I like being busy? I speak to people all the time that say, oh, I have to be busy. If I sit still, I go mad. If I don't have anything to do, I go mad. I get really irritable. But if that's the case, that's fine. But are you focusing your time and your energy in the right place? Are you doing things that matter to you? Are you doing things that are important to you and important to other people? Or are you just filling your time in order to be busy? So think about the stories that we tell ourselves when we think about time. And remember, it's your time, it's your resource, it's your story. Nobody's going to tell you what you're doing with it is wrong. Just a question of, are you checking in with yourself to make sure that for yourself, you're using your time in the best way that works for you. There are lots of myths about how we use our time and what we can do with our time. And for me, I know a lot of people will disagree with this, but for me, multitasking is the biggest myth of all. I personally don't think you can do a number of things well at the same time. And I know there'll be lots of people that argue with this, and lots of people will say I'm wrong, and I would say that because I'm a man. But this is something I really believe in. I think a really good example of this is if you're driving down the motorway at 70 miles an hour and you try to read a book at the same time, think about what's going to happen. It's an example of multitasking. It might be a bit extreme, but think about what's likely to happen when you do that. You know, if you're carving your joint on Sunday, or you're cutting a loaf of bread and you're trying to do something else at the same time, you're thinking about something else at the same time, you're trying to sort the kids out, you're trying to stir the dinner while it's cooking while you're cutting the bread, you know, the likelihood is that you're going to end up with a cut. You're going to end up needing a plaster. Is that a good idea? Is that good use of your time? Two really simple, silly examples, but just I want you to think about, if you're doing lots of things, are you doing them well, or are you doing lots of things badly, or lots of things mediocre? So I'll just get you to think about that. Being busy is good is another myth. You know, we keep busy, but we're doing really well, really important. All the things I spoke about earlier. Another myth is you just need to work harder to get stuff done. You need to put more effort into this. You don't meet the deadlines. Why haven't you put more effort into this? Is something we've all heard people say. But working harder doesn't necessarily mean you're using your time any better, unless you've taken the time to decide what it is I'm going to focus on, what's important, what needs to get done. Otherwise, we're back to that, just being busy, just working harder for the sake of it. Just because you work hard at something doesn't mean it's important. You know, there's not really a correlation between the amount of time you spend on something to how important it is. Important things can be really quick, really swift, and things that we take lots of time over can be not really worth it, not important. They're just filler, if you like. And if you're into filler, you'd be better off doing something else, spending that time somewhere else. Time management tools work for some people, don't work for everybody. The classic one is if you have a to-do list. You know, at what point does your to-do list become a comfort blanket? And again, we're back to that situation. And my to-do list is bigger than yours. I'm much more important. You know, I've got my to-do list. Look how busy I am. I can't possibly come to this thing because my to-do list is massive. I've only managed to cross off one thing today. I've taken one thing off and put 4 things on. That's how busy I am. That's how important I am. That's how important my time is to me. And all of that is a myth, really. And if you're going to use some of those time management tools, and a lot of people like to have a to-do list, my suggestion would be rewrite it every day. So when you look at it, you think, how much effort do I want to put into this to rewrite it every day? But I'm going to sit at the end of my working day, or the beginning of the next day, I'm going to go, that one, I want to put that on, that's important. That one, I'm not sure why it's on there. That one I've done, that one didn't need to be on there. That one, I don't even know what that means, so I'm not going to copy that over. And if you get into the habit of copying things over every day, you get a much more focused to-do list. You get a much smaller to-do list, one that means something, isn't just there because you think, oh, I need to do that, I put that on my to-do list. Now, if you think about it, let it go. If you think about it again, somebody says to you, can you get this done for me? Then maybe you need to consider putting it on your to-do list. I would keep a daily to-do list to about 5 things at maximum. Get those done, get some of them done, get them done really well. You'll go home feeling really satisfied, really secure that you've used your time well. There are lots of things when we're thinking about time and how we use time that will waste our time as well. And some of these, are quite common, but I'll go through them again because I think it's really useful just to remind ourselves what we are doing with our time. And it's really useful, I think, when we're thinking about time wasters, to think about time like money. You have so much time to spend in a day, just like you have so much money to spend in a day. Think really carefully what you're going to do about it. You wouldn't waste money like some of us waste time. So if you think about time in a different way, we can address some of the time wasters that we use. Some common things really, worrying about things that we have no control over, no influence over. You know, we can watch the news and we can spend a lot of time worrying about what's happening in the world. Can we do anything about it? No. We can worry about things that have happened in the past. You know, oh, if only I hadn't have said that. If only I'd have not gone out wearing that outfit. If only I'd done this better. If only I hadn't parked somewhere where I know I shouldn't have parked, but I made the decision at the time. You can't go back and change it. You can't go back and make it different. You can't go back and stop it. You just have to accept things and move on. What can I control? What can I influence? Where am I going to spend my precious time? Where am I going to use my time as money? We can rehash old ideas and worry about things that we said. We can end up doing stuff for the sake of it. You know, I'm busy because busy is good. Back to that thing again that I mentioned earlier. We can be juggling too many things at one time that will suck our energy, just like they would suck our time, suck our money away from us. Sorry. Think about hours as £10 notes, if you like, if that helps. You know, where am I going to spend this £10 note today? Where am I going to spend this £10 note right now? Am I going to waste it on something? Do I need coffee? Do I need food? Where do I need to spend this so best gives me the return I need? Think about your time like that. Where am I going to use my time now in order to get the best out of it? But don't overthink. If you spend too much time thinking, we can spend too much time underacting. Overthinking is good if you're in the right place to do it, and that's what you need to do at that time. I'm not saying don't do it, but is it the best thing that you can do with your time at the moment? I read philosophy, and one of the things with philosophy is we're always thinking, we're always talking about ideas, but often accused of not doing anything. So you have these great ideas, massive discussion, isn't it wonderful? Now go and do something. And we need to be careful that we don't fall into that trap. The other thing that can really waste a lot of time is looking for perfect. And I talked about this in the previous webinar, and we talked about Pareto's law, 80-20 principle. You know, you get 80% of your effort goes into finding the last 20% of perfection. Is that really a good place to use your time? Sometimes it is. You know, if you're in a cultural sphere, if you're an artist or a writer or a musician, then probably it's a better place to use your time. For those of us that at work at least don't operate in those environments, we'd have to say, is it really a good place to spend your time? Is perfect wasting time? Can we get close enough? And is close enough good enough? Most customers would say yes, believe it or not. Most customers would say, I want it now. If it's going to take another 3 months to get it perfect, I'm probably not going to have waited that long. I'm probably going to have gone to another supplier. So think about that. Is that a good use of your time? And this is really important as well when you're given deadlines. You know, I want you to do this and I want it done by Friday. Looking at getting it done perfectly may not be an option. So don't overthink it. Don't look for perfect. Don't worry about it too much. Get done what you can. Deliver something can always be built on. Most things in life aren't a one-shot hit. There's lots of iteration to get it better and better and better. It doesn't all have to be done at once. So when we're thinking about deadlines and we're thinking about how we're going to use our time, and thinking about tasks that we've been given or tasks that we've given ourselves, it's often really good to chunk things up and think about the large things that need to be done first. And there's a wonderful video on YouTube after this webinar, if you want to go and have a look at this. There's a wonderful, lots of examples of this. It was started by Stephen Covey, and it's thinking about time in a jar. And what they do is they put golf balls in the jar, then they put smaller things in the jar, then they put smaller things, and they put sand in. There's a really nice one out there. I forget who does it, but there's a really nice one where it ends up with a bottle of beer going in the jar as well, which is a really nice metaphor, because whatever you're doing, if you think about the large important things, whatever is important to you, these are important things to you, not important things that somebody else has set on you necessarily. Then you think about the less important things. Then you think about the smaller things, all the minutiae, answering our email, checking the web pages for whatever we need to do, you know, thinking about where we park the car, all the small things that we can't do anything about. But there's always time for a beer with your friends or a coffee with your friends. You can always pour that into the jar at the end. But if you do the small stuff first, there's no room for the big things. Really interesting video, really worth having a look at that if you get a chance. But always remember, you know, when it comes to the small things, don't worry about the small things. They're not gonna break you. And often everything is small stuff. So don't sweat the small stuff. We need to think about flow with our time and not balance. And the reason I say not balance is because balance really is about not falling over. And if we're into a situation where we think, well, we need to balance or we're going to fall over, that feels quite negative. So think about leveling your time out, making it flow like a nice gentle wave. How am I using my time to the best of my ability? How am I keeping my health in mind? How am I keeping my sanity in mind, if you like? So I'm not rushing and rushing and rushing and then have a trough with nothing to do. Then rush and rush and rush and have a trough with nothing to do. So we want to flow, keep that balanced out. Think about how we're going to use our time now. We get more control over it because we're chunking it up and we're thinking about what's important. We can flow on to the next important thing really easily and a lot smoother. And then we get that rhythm of how we're going to use our time. Lots of people like to think about this in a much more strategic way. And I'm one of these people. I tend to deal with my email all in the mornings, put time aside first thing in my day, look at all my email, deal with all my issues, think about all my admin. Then I get into my creative space. And then by the afternoon, by the middle of the afternoon, I'm just going through process. I concentrate all my time and all the things that are going to put a demand on me in the morning, because that's when I'm most creative, that's when I'm most effective. So you might want to think about that as well. Think about your own life rhythm. When is a good time for you? Are you an early bird? Are you a night owl? Are you somewhere in between? And when are you most energetic? Think about doing your big important things when you're energetic. Identify the things that are conflict for you. And this is really important when we're thinking about how we use time, because you may be asked at work to focus on something that is a real conflict for you. You may not agree with it, you may not like it, you may not like the way the organization's going. We talk about this in a webinar about values as well. But think about what's important to you, where you feel you need to spend your time. And if you work in a team, it's really good to get to know where other people have their values as well, because that way you can say, I'm not the best person for this, I'll help out, but if this deadline is tomorrow, I just can't do it. We need to get somebody else involved. I will help them, but in terms of getting this done, it's not, I can't do it. And be honest about it. We all have a responsibility to say, I can't do this. We all have a responsibility to say, I need some help, give me some help here. We need to think about how we're going to do it in small steps, and we need to think about easy wins. And when we're thinking about rhythm, we need to think about riding that wave like a surfer, or a canoeist rather. Your gentle waves, you're riding along, you're fully in control, rather than being a surfer where everything's crashing around you. So go with it, flow with it. Really important. Now, when we're thinking about time wasters, there are a lot of people that are going to be your time bandits. People are going to try and steal time from you. And there's some classics as you're in the workplace. We've all come across the offloader. I've got a job to do. I really can't be bothered. You look like you might do it. Here it is. I need you to do this. Bad delegation. Give you the job. Walk away. Then come back and say, why haven't you got this done? I gave you this task to do. You haven't got it done. What's going on? So we need to be aware of those people. Watch out for them. Be prepared to deal with them. And I'll come on to that in just a second. Got time vampires, people that will come and suck all your time away. They do this by standing at your desk, just talking to you about nothing. They will come and they will pick at your time and nibble away at your time. By the end of the day, they had nothing to do. You had a whole pile of stuff to do. You haven't done anything because they've stolen all your time. So think about those, be wary about those, and think about how you can deal with those people. And there's strategies for that as well. Headless chickens. Headless chickens run around. Everything is a rush. Everything needs to be done now. Everything is really, really important. I've not looked at priorities. I've not looked at where I want to spend my time. I'm just boom, 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 bashing from one thing to another. Then we have the best one in the office. We have the special one. My time is much more important than yours. I am higher up the hierarchy than you. I'm more important than you. My time is so important. Look how much they pay for my time compared to your time. So I'm just going to use your time because that's really, really cheap and we can get it done quickly because I'm just so special. And those people, we all see those people, we all recognize those people. We need to be able to say no to those people. We need to be able to say no to most of these people. And then we've got the ASAP monster. I need this done as soon as possible. Okay, when is as soon as possible? Well, as soon as possible. But as soon as possible for you might be tomorrow afternoon, 5 o'clock. As soon as possible for me might be the day before we break up for Christmas. What do you want here? What's ASAP mean to you? And remember, as we talk about all these things, it's your time, it's your choice. Now, I'm looking at the clock and I'm looking like I might be stealing a bit of your time here because I might be overrunning. So I hope you'll bear with me. We're nearly through this, but hopefully you'll be happy to stay with me. So it very much is your time, and what you do with it is to a certain extent up to you. Now, you can't always say, I'm not going to do this task, I'm not going to do this deadline because I don't agree with it and I haven't got time. So we can say, yes, but I would like to do this, I'm happy to help, but I can't do it right now. We can say, no, I'm too busy. Now, if we say, no, I'm too busy, the likelihood is if somebody's asking you to do something, if they're above you in an organization, you're going to say, oh, why is that? What are you doing? So if you say no, you need to be prepared to back that up and say, I'm too busy because I'm doing this, or I'm too busy because somebody else has asked me to do that. Yeah. We can say nothing. If we're asked to do something and it's a peer, we can just say nothing. But whatever we say, we need to say it clearly. We need to be able to justify why we're saying what we're saying. Now, this is really important to remember this when you're given a task, because sometimes in our lives we're working with people who say, I need this done, and now I need this done, and now I need this done. And it's really, really important for us to have the courage and have the strength. And it is difficult sometimes to be able to say, okay, I can do that, but what would you like me to prioritize? What is the most important to you? Or you've given me this task, X has given me that task, Y has given me that task. Could I ask you to talk about it amongst yourselves? Decide which is most important that you want me to focus on first. I'm happy to help everybody, but what is it you want me to focus on first? I can't do all of this at the same time to a quality that would be acceptable. Now, I appreciate that that is really hard for some people, and it's really hard because a lot of us want to please people. We want to be nice, we want to be used, and we want to be engaged with people. But it's okay. It's okay to say no. And once you do it a couple of times, it gets easier. But you have to be able to say no because. Now, I can't do it now. I could do it next Friday. Would that work for you? No. Well, what do you want me to prioritize? Because I can only do one thing at a time. Would it be best if we brought somebody else into this? We have to have those difficult conversations, and we talk about difficult conversations in another webinar. I keep referring to different webinars today, but hopefully this series of webinars, if you stay with it, will be very useful for you. So I've pulled time back, so I'm going to go into my final thoughts here. It's really important when you think about time, how you're using it, and I'm glad I managed to pull it back because I didn't want to talk about time and then overrun if necessary. Some things to think about, and if time were money, think about how you would spend it. Think about what you would do with it. It's your time. Don't let other people drag it away from you. And this works in private life as well. You may, for example, be asked to go to your niece's christening. You may really not want to do that. You may really not want to do anything to do with that. And you may think, actually, what I'd rather do this afternoon is spend my time watching the football, or spend my time reading a book, or playing a musical instrument, or whatever it might be. And you have to be able to say to yourself, yeah, my time is valuable, but actually, where am I going to focus it today? And you have to make those decisions. Don't let people just steal your time because you think you ought to do something that you don't really want to do. Think about it as money. Think about where you would spend that money. Would you give money to somebody you didn't want to give money to? Would you give money to somebody for something you didn't like? So think about it like that way. Help you focus on your time, focus where you're using your time. If the doctors told you you could only work a couple of hours a day, what would you focus your time on? Might be a silly question for some people, but I think it's a useful way to just think, actually, yeah, what is important? Equally, if you had a gun to your head, the reverse of this, you had a gun to your head and you had to stop doing 4 or 5 different things that were consuming your time, what would you remove? This is a good way of thinking what's really important, because believe me, not everything is important. Not everything that you have on your list will be as important as you might think it is when you first put it on your list. What are the top 3 things that you're using to fill your time productively? And equally, on the other side of that, what are the top 3 things that are wasting your time? What are the things that you do that you see no reason for? I've seen people put together reports because the reports have always been generated. Nobody reads them, they're wasting their time. If you stopped doing something, how long would it take for somebody to notice? If it takes longer than a week, you may not need to do it. If it takes longer than a fortnight for somebody to notice you've stopped doing it, you don't need to do it at all. Unless it's something that's law, that's a legal requirement, ask yourself, really, do I need to stop doing this? If I stop it, what will happen? If you only accomplish one thing today, will you be satisfied with what you've done? You need to value your time as a finite resource. You've only got so much of it. How you spend it is your choice and very much down to you. Now, you may say to yourself, for example, I want to spend my time making money. I'm going to do that until I'm 45. I'm going to retire early and live the life of Riley. That's great. You may say, actually, I want to spend my time smelling the flowers and writing poetry. I don't want to work. I know that I'm only going to have so much money to live on, but that's fine. That's what I want to focus on. So where do you want to spend your time? Think about that. Think carefully about what you give your time to. Don't multitask. It doesn't work. If you think it does, check in with yourself. Is it really working? And last of all, we know you can't get it on at the moment because the website is down, but Management Direct is a really, really good resource. And if you're a member, you get on it for free. Loads of other resources on there about how to manage your time, some tools for time management as well. And that's it for me. And I will hand over back to Natasha, and I hope you've all found this useful.
Thank you, David. We have had a few questions come in earlier today. So what is the ideal response if you have work to complete for a customer with pressurized timescales, but at the same time have a pressured deadline with your manager? So which would you choose as a first priority?
I think that's a really good question, and I think it comes back to whose deadlines are they. Sometimes, if we're given a deadline, it's not necessarily our deadline. I give you a deadline. I want it done by Thursday. That might not be your priority. So often it's a case of having that discussion I mentioned earlier and saying, I've got these two things to do. Which one is the priority for you? Do you want me to do my job that I always do, or do you want me to do this for you? Which is more important as my manager? And ask managers to help. And if you are a manager and you're looking after a team, then think about your team. Think about what you're asking them to do with their time, what you're asking them to do in terms of deadlines. Remember who you've given a deadline to, because it's very easy to go around, if you've got a large team, give everybody a deadline, and everybody's deadline is the same as Friday. And then really, when all that comes in, what are we going to do with it on Friday? So it's a two-way street. It's about saying, what's a priority to you, and help me understand what you want me to do first.
That's great, thank you. And so, yeah, asking for clarity whenever you need it is not a weakness in any way. So that's great to hear. So how do you switch mindset from creative to economic and vice versa when you're under pressure?
I think, again, that's a really good question, because you've got two opposing forces there, really. And I think if we're focused on economics and we're focused on money, and there will be times when we have to do that. If you think about the current situation, as we come out of lockdown, people are going to be focused more on the economy, more on getting customers back in. And for me, that's about saying we need to focus on what we do well and not worry about the creativity at the moment. Creativity comes with time. If you want to focus on creativity on a regular basis, think about when you've got the energy to do that. And that may be first thing in the morning, middle of the day, after a couple of large coffees, last thing at night before you go to bed. Think about when is most energetic for you. When can you be most creative? And then when you have less energy, think about the process that you know how to do, you do well, you can do blindfold. That's when you need to move away from the creative and move back into the economic and focus on where you're using the energy that you've got left. But sometimes we just have to focus on one thing. Sometimes in times of dire economy, we have to focus on doing fewer things really well in order to build up the business. Then we can come back to the creativity later.
That's great, thank you. So we've heard about discussing things with your line managers if you're not sure what the priority is. So what would you say around prioritization around several urgent tasks that you have discussed?
I think if you've got different people applying those tasks to you, I think there are a number of things here. If you've got different people applying those tasks to you, I think it's a good thing to say, could you decide what's most important and I'll focus on what's most important. I think if you have a manager that keeps giving you tasks that are unachievable, you have to start to say, well, why is this unachievable? Am I spending my time doing things I don't need to do? Can you help me identify what I can stop doing? If none of that works and you're unable to have that conversation with your manager, then you might want to consider going the next step to the manager's manager and potentially raising the issue with them. Because that, for me, feels more like an issue of poor management than poor timekeeping.
Absolutely. And, you know, if you can, manage upwards.
Absolutely.
If someone says they need, you know, 10 tasks by a certain time, what's the likelihood of them actually getting to those tasks at that time?
Absolutely. There's a little anecdote, if we've got time, I'll share with you. It's about getting to know your manager as well, getting to know people. I had a manager years ago, when I first started working for him. He would say things out loud, and I would crack on and get these things done. And at the end of the week, I would say, here's that thing you asked for. And he would say, I didn't ask for that. And what I found out was, after working with him for about a month or so, actually he was thinking out loud. So be aware of these kinds of things as well, because I put a lot of effort into trying to do a good job for him, and he didn't even want me to do the job. So what I realized was, he would say things out loud. I would give it a couple of days. If he said it again, it was a task. If he didn't say it again, it was him thinking out loud. Saved me a lot of work, saved me a lot of time. And we got on really well as a result. So it is about relationships as well. You know, it's not just about task orientation. It's about relationships, knowing your team, letting your team know you, being honest, being human. More and more these days, we need to be human with people and let them be human with us. We get much more out of people if we do that.
Absolutely. We've had loads of comments in the chat, lots of people discussing what we've raised today, saying, you know, what they find best as well. So it's great to see all that conversation going on. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today's session. So thank you for everyone who's joined us and participated. Thank you, David, for your insights and expertise, as always.
You're welcome.
So if you are a member of the CMI, you can access Management Direct, which has a whole range of practical resources to help apply your learnings from today. The website should be back up and running very shortly. For anyone new to CMI, or those who haven't heard of Management Direct, it's full of personal and professional development opportunities, including over 400 videos, loads of ebooks, and it also has all of the recordings of these webinars as well. So thank you again, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.